So these are the lecture videos for Chapter 15, the earliest art to the Bronze Age. We'll start with Paleolithic art, move into Neolithic, and then we'll talk about early Mesopotamia and then the ancient Egyptian art as well. You can look at these learning objectives. Those are in the beginning of your chapter. We'll talk about the origins of early Paleolithic art. We'll talk about the changes in Neolithic art that happen with the shift from Paleolithic. We'll talk about the style and functions of Bronze Age art in Mesopotamia, and we'll talk about the cultural features of art from ancient Egypt. So basically art history is kind of interesting because the art objects are with us physically in the present, so we still have that one-on-one experience with the art object, and also even kind of with the artist that made it, even if it was thousands of years ago. Art objects from the past really help us understand past societies and cultures, and can be very vibrant even though they were made potentially thousands of years ago. Actually, a famous artist, Pablo Picasso, believed art from the past is more alive today than it ever was. So the earliest major civilizations typically sprang up in fertile river valleys. This is because, the abundance of water and good soil for crops. So civilization kind of came along with growing of crops and agriculture. The area between the Tigris and Euphrates is one of the first areas to be populated in Iraq. We'll talk about the Nile River Valley in Africa, or Egypt in Africa, the Indus River Valley in Pakistan and India, and we will also talk about the Yellow River region. And this is where the earliest civilizations were established. So we'll talk about the earliest artworks found, and then we'll talk about the Bronze Age civilizations of the Middle East and Mesopotamia, and then Egypt last. So and we'll talk about a couple sites, like at least one site in North America, one site in Australia, and one site in Indonesia and South Africa as well. So around 2 million years ago in East Central Africa, early hominids made stone cutting tools. So early humans began to develop the ability to reason and visualize things in their heads, especially when they developed the ability to imagine the need for a tool and then craft it from the available materials that were around them, and then improve the design over time. The ability to be able to do that is what makes us kind of unique as humans, and the ability to imagine these things and mentally visualize these things sets us apart from other animals. And basically the ability to make art comes from the same skill of basically tool making. So the first stone tools pop up in Africa around 1 million years ago. And remember, this far back, it's not Homo sapiens, it's actually our early ancestors, hominids, that made these early tools. Later, they ended up developing hand axes and chopping tools, and basically that awareness of the relationship between the shape and form of a tool and the function of a tool was an early step in the history of art. So that's kind of what they believe anyway. Early evidence of art is also found as sprinkled powders and beads that accompanied burial sites, and that suggests that these early humans practiced some sort of ritual burial. Sorry, I have a bug in my window that I can't do much about right now. So we'll take a look at some early examples. Engraved ochre from Africa, 75,000 BCE, about 4 inches long, from the Chauvet Cave. This is considered a Paleolithic piece. It's from South Africa, and it's believed one of the earliest examples of art ever found. About 77,000 years old. Scholars believe the marks may be symbols. Basically, it's kind of an abstract pattern of parallel diagonal lines between horizontal lines. Ostrich eggshells were found in a nearby site as well that have similar markings. And these are thought to be some of the earliest examples of artistic creativity out there. Other early examples come from around 40,000 years ago, towards the end of the last ice age. So the ice kind of retreated northward, and ancient peoples followed the animals they hunted for food. They were hunter-gatherer societies in the Paleolithic period. So most objects from this time period are made of stone, And this period, like I said, is called the Paleolithic Period, which means the Old Stone Age. So the Hole Fels figurine, 3500 BCE, it's a carved mammoth tusk. And it's a female. You can see that quite clearly. So this is, potentially the oldest carved figure, at least ever found. And it was found in southwestern Germany. She's about 2 inches high, 35,000 years old. And her female anatomy is very exaggerated, which is kind of typical of female figurines from this time period. These are actually found quite a few places in Europe, and they all kind of look the same to some degree. She also features grooves in various parts of her body, these deep grooves and cut marks. Not sure what those mean. And there's also a ring where her head should be, which allowed someone to possibly wear this as a necklace around their neck. So this is a very early figurine found in Germany. Here's another female figurine. This one's a little bit more famous, I guess. Typically she's called the Venus of Willendorf or Woman of Willendorf. She's about 25,000 years old. She's made out of limestone. She's about 4.5 inches high. And she has very exaggerated breasts and hips, much like the other figurine. Her face lacks the detail. Her arms rest on her breasts. It's very similar to the last figure that we looked at. And like I said, a lot of these figurines of women with very exaggerated breasts and hips, and their female anatomy is very exaggerated. These are found all over in various sites throughout the world. And they thought that they had a specific purpose. We can only guess at that. Many scholars believe that these are depictions of the Paleolithic image of the creator, the great mother goddess. Many believe they're symbols of fertility. Some even believe that they are signs of recognition. When groups of hunter-gatherers encountered each other, they would, show these to one another to prove what tribe they were from, potentially. There's a lot of theories out there. But it does seem to have to do with fertility, at least. We'll talk about painting next in the Paleolithic. They're typically found on cave walls and are mostly dominated by animal subjects. Very few human figures are found in Paleolithic cave paintings. And the ones that are very simplified human figures. And Paleolithic paintings are more naturalistic in style than later paintings, so very natural looking figures typically. So one of the oldest known cave paintings were found in Indonesia. It's called Pig, Deer in Hand. Let's see, we can see this here. The artist made paint by grinding some sort of rock or mineral into a powder and then possibly mixing it with some sort of water or liquid, and then put that in their mouth and then blew it around their hand. So they might have used their mouth to blow this through a reed even to create this kind of negative handprint on the wall. There's also an animal in this piece. It's a long extinct species of pig deer. And the red powder of the pig deer dates to at least 35,000 years ago. So this is one of the oldest cave paintings that we have. It's not very well preserved, as you can see. You can't see it very well. There's a better preserved painting of animals at the Chauvet Cave in France. It's from 2800 BCE. And they're really nicely done. They're painted with charcoal, earthen pigments. They're very naturalistic. As you can see, they're very lifelike animal figures of horses, rhinos. There's some tigers, other large animals. Many of the animals are now extinct. This was such a long time ago. And then there was actually in the same cave, a flat slab was found nearby with a bear skull, which is thought to possibly be an altar. So as you can see, the artist was very talented. These rhino look really pretty natural. These horse heads look great. I mean, they look like they were, done by an artist today, honestly. Scholars are not totally sure what the purpose of these cave paintings were, but we discussed earlier that these people were hunter-gatherers. They followed these large groups of animals For their survival, they gathered plants to eat, and then they hunted. And they had really no like permanent housing like we know today. They probably had something that resembled a tent, much like, the North American Native Americans used teepees. I'm not saying that these people had the exact same design, but definitely a tent of some sort was probably something that they used because they had to follow around these herds of animals. So the successful hunt was very paramount into the survival of these early humans. So they may have developed elaborate rituals around the hunt that involved caves and painting these animals and capturing their spirit and doing some sort of ritualistic thing that maybe they believed helped to aid them in their hunt. Another theory is that these particular paintings were used to initiate youth, and the painted animals had some sort of symbolic or spiritual association in the initiation of youth. But we really don't know what these paintings mean. We can only speculate. But they seem to think that it maybe had some sort of shamanistic or ritualistic association, possibly with the hunting these animals, because that was very important to these people. So we'll take another look. Some Paleolithic art is found above ground. We'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at a piece in Utah from North America. So this is basically one of the oldest examples of Paleolithic art found in North America, and it features silhouetted forms resembling humans wearing symbolic garments. We don't really know what the meaning of this piece is, but there's a lot of detail in this piece. I think, that's pretty interesting. Lots of pattern, lots of detail. There's same earthen pigments are used here as were used in the paintings in the Europeans that we looked at, but they're not nearly as old as the European examples we looked at. North American artists rarely depicted animals, which is kind of the opposite of what we saw in Europe. Many scholars believe these North American paintings are part of possibly a shamanistic ritual. They don't really know, though. That's just speculation. Rock art carvings are known as petroglyphs, and they are made by scratching or pecking the surface of the stone. So we'll take a look at some petroglyphs next. Let me check and see how much time we have. We have a couple minutes left. I think we can probably get through the petroglyphs from Northwest Australia, up to 10,000 years old. So the stuff let's see. Okay, here it is. So these are petroglyphs. They're carved into the stone. They're near the northwest coast of Australia. These are called the Murujunga petroglyphs, and they feature thousands of carvings that depict humans, animal, and mythical beings all together. The age is difficult to determine because they're kind of exposed to the elements, and the soil sediment layers are not present because those help actually date the painting, but they don't have good sediment layers. And these have also been eroded by acid rain as well because of the exposed rock that they are made on. So that kind of wraps up the Paleolithic period. We're going to start talking about the Neolithic period in the next video.